Hey friends, good afternoon. Thanks for joining our second masterclass in our succession planning series for 2019. We're happy to have you guys back. Last time we talked about everything business, what your options are for your business. Today we're going to talk about everything real estate, what possibilities you have if you own your real estate in your next life, and how you use that real estate to build wealth and to create your future. I'm excited to have a special guest, Gregg Seibert, with us today from Essential Properties. Gregg has been a great partner to our clients, and we love working with them, and he is a wealth of knowledge on how investors look at real estate. So we expect to get some great information from Gregg. First, I'd like to tell you guys about a couple of opportunities coming up. Carrie, I'm not in presenter mode. There we go. Okay, got it. First of all, the plan for today, I want to tell you about a few things happening at Hinge. I want to talk to you about thoughts for you to keep your real estate if you own it, regardless of what your decisions are with your business. I want to talk to you about transitioning the ownership of your real estate from you to someone else, and then what's coming up around here in the future. So first of all, just got back from China, from the World Forum on Early Education. If you guys have never been to this conference, it is phenomenal. There were early education providers from 71 countries. It was fascinating. We built some. It wasn't just interesting and good to connect with other people. I think there's some real business opportunities to be made between countries. Here are some photos I was able to present along with team members Kathy Petchel and Molly Petchel. We had a great time, and they have just announced they're every other year. They will be in Vancouver in 2021, so very close, no excuse not to go. Look that up and really consider that opportunity. It's a phenomenal one. So really enjoyed that. This week we have Kathy Petchel and Mike Pepper from our team at PACE in California. If you're in California and going to PACE, be sure that you meet Kathy and Mike. Kathy will be presenting on marketing, really tough strategy in this today's parent group, and to be sure that you're marketing effectively to what parents are looking for today. And then Mike's going to be talking about one of our biggest issues right now is balancing the rising staff cost with your tuition rates. We're doing a lot of training on that right now. It's everyone's number one pain point. We've got some great strategies for you. So if you're not able to make it there, reach out to us if we can give you more information on that, because we're feeling your pain. That one's a tough one for everybody right now. And critical that we keep up with our tuition rates and don't get behind and get ourselves in trouble with what we're having to pay staff today. In a couple of weeks, I think week after next, Kathy Petchel and I are at Leadership Connections in Chicago. We're going to do 3 hours, I think, on your school's financing, and Kathy will talk about staffing. And if you're attending, we'd love to see you there. So our first time at that conference, we hear wonderful things about them. If you're in that area, consider their conference. Should be a great opportunity. And then we're excited that we have launched registration for our annual one-day financial event, Thrive. We're mixing that up a little bit this year. We're going to be in Denver. We're excited to be at the Kimpton Bourne, which is a fabulous hotel and conference center. We were at Kimpton in Austin this year for Shift, and we love the brand. Decided we might just follow Kimpton around the country. So we're in Denver. We're adding on a new feature this year, which is individualized financial coaching. So we have offered to analyze each attendee's financial situation and schedule a one-on-one meeting with them the afternoon before the day's event. The reason we like this is that if you are targeted to where your best opportunities are, to become more financially healthy, then we believe you'll get much more out of our training day. Along with the training and the one-on-one coaching, we also have some fun. So we have a social event on the night of the 12th, on the Thursday night before the workshop on the Friday. That should be a lot of fun. We have people from all over the country that will be there. We've had some strong alliances made between our guests, and we think you'll find the others who are there very interesting. So if you need more information, reach out. We'd love to see you there. Again, our new financial diagnosis appointment, so we're pretty excited about that. You can register for both the event and to book an appointment with one of our brokers online. We'll gather the key financial data we need to best help you, and look forward to seeing a lot of you there. So let's jump into this real estate content. We have this broken down really into two parts. We're assuming that you own your real estate in this content and that you want to learn more about the options for whether it's best to keep your real estate or to sell your real estate. But I'd like to back up and just make a couple of comments, because we get the question a lot about, should I own real estate or should I lease real estate as you grow or own your early childhood company? My opinion, there are pros and cons to both, but my opinion is that it's mainly a resource issue. First of all, there's no right answer. They're both good strategies. I'm a fan of real estate ownership. I'm a landlord, and I like real estate as an asset, and it's a lot easier to manage than operating a business. You typically get a rent check. You pay the mortgage if you have a mortgage, and you go on about your life, but not quite as intense as running a business. But as we advise clients, we talk a lot about resources. So we believe that until you exit your business, you have to continue to grow. And the reason you have to continue to grow is that that's how you keep quality people on your team, and you keep them engaged, and you keep opportunities in front of them. As you're growing, you have to make the decision about whether you use your resources for, and growth could mean something internal. It does not mean you have to go from one school to two schools. A lot of people got into the business because they like the day-to-day connection with teachers and families. And so they don't really like the thought that they would get beyond one school, and there's no problem with that. So growth for you may mean an expansion of that building. It may mean that you possibly go into your public school and operate their after-school program. Maybe it means that you add outdoor learning as a component of your school, maybe language immersion. You know, there are so many different ways to go, but you have to keep moving forward in your business. So as you consider real estate ownership, does it make more sense for you to use those resources to buy real estate? It's expensive, right? It takes cash. Most people, as they buy, would go for an SBA route, mainly because SBA requires less down payment. But still, 10% of $1 million plus building, which is average, is a lot of cash when maybe that opens a new school. Maybe it gets you into a public school after school. Maybe those resources are better used for business. So that's the juggle. Where are the resources best used? So just a word there on whether you make the decision to actually own it or not. But for these purposes, we're assuming that you own it and that your choices are independent of your business. So it's a concept that's foreign to people initially. A lot of people got into business not to have a succession plan or retire or make money from it. Some people thought about that initially, but typically people got into, especially early education, for the mission, for the joy of teaching, and for what it provides to their community, without the thought that maybe I can make some money from this business one day. Maybe I can make some money from this real estate one day. Well, we are your champions, so we are thinking about this for you, because I've been on the operations side of the business, and I know how hard you guys are working. So we will be your bird dogs about being sure that you are rewarded for the tremendous risk and awake in the middle of the night wondering if you can make the mortgage and payroll, and signing your personal guarantee and succeeding in your business. We feel like that you should be rewarded eventually for that. So you can think about your business and your real estate completely independently. They're two separate assets. You can own a business and not the real estate associated with it. You can do the opposite. You can own the real estate and not the business that's in it, or you can do both. You can own the business and the real estate. So as you're exiting your business, what are your options for your real estate? These are a little bit self-explanatory, but like I said, we want you to build value in your real estate, your business, and create multiple options for the future. Same with the content we put out last month on your business options. We want you to have multiple options, understand them well, because in our experience, you can make a plan. Plans are great, but you have to have a plan and then be opportunistic about where the best opportunity is. So your first choice might not be the best opportunity, and something might come flying in from another direction. You need to understand it, be prepared and ready to act on it. So to understand multiple avenues is a huge asset. So first of all, what if you sell your business and you keep the real estate and you lease the real estate to the new business owner? Typically, as we begin to work with people who are selling their business, the first thought from the seller is, I'm out. I don't want to think about it. I want you to take my real estate out. I want you to take my business out. The end. And that's perfectly fine. That's not, there was a time in the world where we had to match up. We had to sell businesses and then later sell the real estate once we secured the business owner. No longer a barrier at all. Today is much easier because of the amount of investment in real estate, and especially our industry, which Gregg will be able to tell us more about in a few minutes. That is not a barrier at all to sell both at the same time. However, it's also a good opportunity to sell the business and keep the real estate and gain a revenue stream. So why would you do that, and when would you do that? My first advice for people is know who the tenant is and assess the risk associated with that tenant. So the last thing you want to do is sell your business, lease it to a new operator, and then get the building back not performing well, and then you have a decision to make. Either you sell it and maybe you don't do as well, or you're back in business and you're operating it yourself. So you really want to assess the risk associated with that new tenant and make your decision about, should I only do this if they buy the real estate, or do I really have the opportunity to lease it and be fairly secure? You're never going to be 100% secure, but you want a majority percentage to be secure, or do I sell the whole thing? Again, in today's market, both of those are an opportunity, and we typically will go into a transaction with the mindset that we wait and see who the tenant is and then make the decision on the real estate. So that's been really nice for our business sellers and a nice change in the last couple of years. Why would you make these different decisions? First of all, what is your risk tolerance? This is the same as any investment that you make. If you're in the stock market or you have money in a retirement plan, you'll often get asked, what is your tolerance for risk? Some people's is very low. They don't want to accept any risk. They want to keep all their money in cash, and they want to earn a little bit of interest, but they don't want the risk associated with things that might earn a higher yield. Some people are the other spectrum. They take a lot of risk. And probably the majority of people are somewhere in the middle. They weigh the risk. They want a little bit of their resource into things that are very secure, and they're okay accepting some risk for other things that might gain a higher yield. So know yourself, know your tolerance for risk. Also, as we mentioned, who is your tenant? that should play in very heavily to your risk analysis. Is it a national operator? Is it a huge company? Not that they're always more secure, but in general, you can be more secure with a larger company as your tenant than, let's say, an individual who's never operated the business before. We said director here, it could be anybody. It could be someone who came in to buy the business who is maybe smaller and doesn't have the same resources. Maybe they haven't operated in the business before. And then you have a higher degree of risk, and you need to assess that. Also, what lifestyle do you want to lead? Like we said earlier, do you want to get a rent check and be happy with that and go fishing? Or do you still enjoy the day-to-day business? So these are all personal considerations as you make the decision. If you're going to own a facility, of course, the benefits of that are that you gain appreciation. So its value grows over time generally. You're able to control what happens to the facility. You get some tax benefits from that. So most people will enjoy the depreciation expense and enjoy the tax savings on that. It gives you more options when you sell your business on what to do with your facility. Also, I think Gregg will mention a 1031 exchange. A 1031 exchange, if you're going to sell it in the future, is a way to exchange investment property from one property to another property tax-free. 1031 refers to the tax code that set up this provision, and it's complicated, as you can imagine, as anything related to our tax code is, but something to figure out. Ask your tax advisor about it. Ask us about it. We think it's a fabulous way to keep your money in real estate and avoid the tax situation. So there are a lot of advisors out there that can help you with it. We mentioned that if you own your facility, it ties up your cash that you might do other things with. You're kind of stuck with the facility. So if you're in business still and you lease a facility, then you can move at the end of your lease to another property if that area has aged out or the demographics have changed. So it gives you more flexibility if you don't own. You might avoid some maintenance and repair costs if you lease your facility. And again, as we said, you have the potential to get stuck with a building that's obsolete. As licensing changes and ratios change, sometimes room sizes aren't effective anymore. So owning boxes you in a little bit on what your opportunities are. But a couple of words on the benefits and burdens of whether to own. Okay, so let's talk about selling your real estate. This is pretty straightforward. So there are two large buckets of what you might do with your real estate. The first one is that you own it and you operate the business and you want to continue to operate the business, but you want to sell the real estate and lease it from someone else. You can use that as a growth asset. So this is one of the things we'll pick Gregg's brain about as soon as I present the major topics here, because he has helped many of our clients to fund their growth by selling current high-performing pieces of real estate and using that money to grow into another site. So that is one way to use your real estate if you're still operating your business to help grow your company. Or if you wanted to sell your real estate and just take the money off the table, pay the taxes on it, and gain some cash. So, of course, that is another opportunity and a different way to look at it. So if you own it and you're still in your business, then you could sell the real estate and use it for cash or for growth. The second thing you might do is sell it with your business, just one transaction. Like we said, we specialize in selling businesses to the nation's largest groups, and by far they don't own their own real estate. So they typically will buy businesses only. And where the opportunity is here is that for the high performing small regional or larger regional or national groups, we have abundant real estate investors that we can match with them and close with one transaction. So it's a bit seamless to our sellers, but the opportunity there is that it's not a barrier anymore to find a single transaction that you can sell your business and your real estate. Might be two different buyers, but again, typically seamless to our sellers. So that has been a big change in the last couple of years that we have enjoyed. I'm going to say a bit about some terminology that might jump up with you later just for you to understand, and talking with people about what your real estate might be worth. And then we're going to pick Gregg's brain. So we have a little chart here on if you have a piece of real estate and there is a business in it. People, so I'm going to say a very simple concept because it's contrary to how most people have learned about the value of real estate and how the value of real estate works if there's a business already in it that's performing. So we have a lot of clients talk to us about the appraisal on their real estate. And appraisals are typically based on how things are selling in the area and what the comps are. So this property sold at this value, meaning your property should sell at a similar value, given its age and location and similar factors. So that's a traditional way to look at what a piece of real estate is worth. If there's an operating business in the building, the real estate is worth what that operating business can pay in rent. So if you think about that logically, a real estate investor is going to buy that building expecting a return on the amount that they pay for the building. So to them, maybe it's the same as putting their money into the stock market and expecting a return of 8%, let's say. So they know that if they put $1 million in the stock market, 8% of $1 million will be their return that is expected. So if they buy a building, they're looking at the cash flow it generates, the rent, as the basis of what that building is worth given the return they expect. So let's use an example and see if I can explain that again with concrete numbers. In this particular chart, there is a business in this building and it's paying annual rent of $165,894. I don't know why we didn't pick a round number, but there you go. Maybe that makes it more credible. If you look down at the chart below, you can see the cap rate or capitalization rate. The cap rate is simply the return on the investment that the investor expects when they get that rent stream. So you could do this one of two ways. You see the cap rate that goes from 7.5% in this chart up to 9.5%. And you will notice that as the cap rate gets larger, the value of the building gets smaller. And this is often something that's hard conceptually in the beginning. The reason for that is that as you expect a bigger return on the stable rent that is not changing, $165,000, if you want a higher return, you can only pay less. If you are willing to take a lower return, you can pay more. And the rent of $165,000 to the value of the building increases or decreases. So in our world, we will typically know the rent and we can then calculate what the building is worth. So let's do the simple math on the $165,000 in rent, which we know is the stable rent this business can afford to pay at certain parameters. This complicated, so I'm going to leave that alone for the moment. And let's say that this investor is willing to make an 8% cap on that rent. Well, where did we get the 8%? If you look at the paragraph above, it's determined by many different factors. They will be looking at the credit strength of the tenant who is operating the business. They want to know how long the lease is, so how long are they going to be paid that rent stream? What is the quality of the building? How strong is it? Where is it? Is it an A market? Is it in a more rural market? What are the economic factors at that time? There's so many factors that go into that person's decision. Just like if you were going to invest in a new school, many different factors would go into that decision. So the investor is looking at many different factors when they make their determination on what return they want on their money. So let's say they want 8%, and they know that the rent this business can afford to pay is $165,894. What they will do is take the $165,894 and divide it by the cap rate of 8%. So divided by 0.08 gives you what they can pay for that building, which is $2,073,675, and expect to get an 8% return on that rent stream of $165,000. So you can follow those numbers across the chart. If they are okay with a 7.5% cap rate, then the number is $2,211,000. If they want a higher return of 9.5%, they're only going to pay $1,746,000. If you want to do the numbers backwards, you could say, can I pay $2,073,675 for this building? Well, if I want an 8% return, then these people need to pay me $165,000 in rent. In that case, you would take the $2,073,000 and multiply it by 8% to get the rent of $165,000. Like I said, so there are two things that confuse people. We're typically doing the calculation backwards because we know the rent. We're trying to calculate the value of the building at that rent. And also, as the cap rate goes up, the value of the building goes down. So if you think about it logically, it makes more sense, but those two things are a little contrary to how people typically think about it. Should have mentioned that we have a question bar. This is probably where this will come in. And we will stop about 15 or 20 minutes before the hour and give you guys a chance to ask me or Greg or both of us questions. So feel free to ask questions about that. So got my expert Greg here. So let me dial Greg in and let's see. Are you with us, Greg?
I'm here.
There you are.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thanks.
Greg. Thanks for joining.
How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you for joining us today. You are up in Pennsylvania today, where Essential is located?
Well, close. New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay, we love New Jersey. We've got a team member there. So thanks for joining. Do you mind if I just ask you to introduce yourself and Essential? Tell us, what you think is relevant about you and the company, and then I'll launch into some questions from there.
Sure, thanks. I'll do a brief introduction, but my name is Gregg Seibert. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a public real estate investment trust called Essential Properties. We started Essential approximately over 3 years ago. We have about 750 properties in 44 states. We kind of specialize, if you would, a little bit in our portfolio is all service, which leads to childcare being, one of our largest sectors, probably behind restaurants and automotive related, but childcare is definitely something that, it's in our top 3 or 4 business lines or sectors we provide capital to. Personally, I've been doing childcare, real estate for REITs for about 15, probably over 15 years. And between a couple of companies I've been with, I've probably done as much childcare, number of transactions anyway, across the United States over that time period as anyone. So that's kind of a high level thumbnail of who we are. So
great.
And who I am.
Thanks for that. I want to expand on another acronym you just used, because I like to, unless you're working in the arena, you will hear the term REIT, R-E-I-T. Essential is a REIT, a real estate investment trust. Gregg mentioned that term, and so I just like to expand on that and be sure that when our guests hear that again, that makes a stronger connection. Gregg, you mentioned that you and Essential have had a focus on, well, service industries for you guys, but especially the early education industry. Can you take us back to when the real estate community first became interested, and maybe talk us through the reasons that it has been a industry of interest?
Sure, and I think a lot of it, it's definitely generating more interest. I would say, in 2005, I was at a REIT. We were probably about the only ones at the time that were actively doing early education. So, and keep it, I will quantify, we do early education. We don't really do charter schools and larger kind of types of education. So we specifically focus on kind of the same niche you do, right? Early childhood education. So I would say that kind of stayed that way with not as much institutional ownership over the years, which was always a bit of a mystery, because for me personally, at the company I was at, it was one of our better performing sectors from like a credit standpoint and loss standpoint. We always did very well in this niche. I would say that, as REITs or triple net REITs specifically have maybe transitioned a bit from owning more traditional retail, like, larger box, traditional 100,000 square foot properties, to more maybe switching gears. And a lot of people are now picking up more of the service component. We're about 90% service at our company, real estate. So we're kind of the highest in the sector almost. But, a lot of others are kind of taking an interest in it because of it's not something that you can replicate, you can buy on Amazon basically, right? So,
Right.
There's no hard goods or soft goods. It's a service that you can't have someone online do for you.
Right, that makes sense. I guess now that we're ordering so much online, the retail real estate is much riskier. So 2005 was probably an interesting time to begin investing in industry, because we all had a little economic downturn a few years after that, right? How did you guys react during that time, or how do you think the early education industry reacted as compared to others?
Well, in our portfolio that I was kind of managing at the time, I do not recall that we had any, defaults or stress, 2009 to 2012 in the early education sector. So it performed in my, our view at the time is, it was a very strong sector. I mean, I think you had a couple things happen. While, some people did lose some, their occupancy did decline, and some chains struggled a bit. But offsetting that, particularly among some of our tenants, was, you maybe had single income families. In the downturn, someone lost a job or took a pay cut. So you had, a lot of, maybe the second wager entering the workforce, and it created more of a need for childcare, as where you maybe had some stay at home. Maybe people were staying home to take care of their children, but two people had to get a job to pay their mortgage at the time, or due to kind of the economic environment we were in, which kind of actually increased occupancy at a number of our tenants.
Okay. I say to people a lot that as an industry, we gained the world's interest because we did perform better than most industries in the economic downturn. And people usually go crazy over that because it was a struggle for some people, but most people reportedly were down about 10% on the top line and flat on the bottom line, which was good in that time period. So
right.
I think we gained some interest at that time just with the relative stability of the industry. Okay.
Right. And like there was some stress maybe on some of the larger companies, but that was probably more related to excessive debt levels. And the debt would come due at the wrong time, right, in 2009 or 10, and it was a challenge to refinance. So it was more of a balance sheet issue than times more than an occupancy, unit level cash flow issue.
Right. Okay, you heard sort of my very high level, do you keep your business and lease real estate? Do you sell it as a growth asset? Do you sell it with your business? Are there any other factors you would add to that you would advise a business owner on as they're considering, what their options are in the future?
Right. I will say, we see all of it, obviously. We do a lot of what we call M&A transactions, where I'm part of the capital stack for the buyer is using to finance the purchase of a business if the real estate is included. So, it varies. Some people, what we do see is, obviously, I think we went over kind of the benefits before you sell your company of why you would do a sale leaseback instead of, mortgage debt with the bank, because you don't have to put as much down payment down. It's kind of an interest-only payment, if you would, that doesn't really amortize, and there's no balloon risk on our transactions. So, it's kind of a personal preference for what people want to do. I would say what we do see a lot when people do buy companies and the sellers retain the real estate, we do pick up on the back end some of those properties when the former owner of the business decides after a few years that for whatever reason they want to further diversify. Let's say they held the real estate, leased it to the company buying the business. It seems over time a lot of those former owners do exit the real estate. So for whatever reason, they may decide that they want to diversify. They may be moving out of the area. They don't want to have all their eggs in one basket, if you would. Maybe there's things at the company. They don't know the people running it as well, or something changed at the company that they would like to, put their money elsewhere. So what those people generally do is a 1031 exchange where, they'll sell the property that is leased to the company they used to own. And a lot of people, when they, sell their business, they may be retiring or semi-retiring. They may have more of an interest in, buying a Walgreens in Florida than owning a daycare that they used to own in the Northeast, right? So, and they could generally do that, through, if you work with your accountant and a lawyer, in a 1031 exchange where you can reinvest all the money, and if you structure it correctly and follow all the rules, it's a tax-free exchange, as Kathy mentioned. Right.
Complicated and worth it, right? I'm so glad you mentioned what you just did, because I think I need to add another slide in my deck here, because you and I just did a transaction like this. So we sold in 2016 a single business to a national provider, and our sellers kept their real estate and leased it until we got the call about 6 months ago, and they said, we really think we want to do something different with our real estate investment. Do you think you could sell the real estate? Well, sure. So Gregg and I put that together for the benefit of that seller and closed a couple of months ago on her real estate. So Gregg, you guys talk through that a little bit, and how you guys view different operators as risk tenants, how you would look at national groups, larger regional, single sites. What, as an investor, because that's what you guys do, how do you look at the operator as a tenant before you decide to invest your money?
Sure, and as you said, that particular transaction was with one of the larger national chains. I would say, we kind of cover the entire spectrum, if you would. A lot of our portfolio in early education, we probably are fairly active at some level with 4 or 5 of the top 10 chains on their real estate. So, at some point we've talked to all of them, and we're fairly active with some or most of them on their real estate needs, either when they're buying a company, right? And they want us to do the real estate simultaneous when they buy the business, or if, as Kathy referenced, this was an existing lease where we knew the tenant and we were able to, maybe buy that property because we know the tenant, we're able to maybe get information that someone else would not be able to. So that's kind of the one end of the spectrum. And on a dollar volume basis, that's where a lot of our dollars are investment, because those are larger companies we have, we just have higher exposure to. We do a lot of regional chains. I'm sure there's people on the phone I've worked with who are in 1 state or 2 states, regional operator, owner, founder kind of profile. Love those companies. That's kind of where I started a long time ago in the early education business, dealing with owner operators who had, anywhere from 5 or 10 to 50 locations. And we also, selectively do some smaller operators who have a really strong business model, and we believe in the people, and, they've maybe proven out their business model with a few locations that it works, and they're mostly local in a certain metro area or within a certain part of a state. So it's kind of a long answer, but I hope I covered your question.
Yeah, that was good. I just didn't want people to think that this was an opportunity only available to national or larger regionals, because we've worked with you guys, and I know you've looked at some other things that were traditionally small, where someone might have, and typically you want them to have at least one high cash flow business, and maybe you'll fund the next one, or you'll take the real estate on that.
Yeah, it varies. I guess, sometimes we don't really compete a lot against the SBA, because that, as you said earlier, that's kind of a 90% potentially financing if you're willing to work through their paperwork and take the time to deal with them. But we usually, as you pick up people after they, maybe established, have a few locations. We really don't do startups. Someone wanting to build one that they don't own any and haven't operated any before. So I think probably the average size of a operator we deal with is probably 20 stores. So we will do the small. I could show you examples of someone who had a niche and were small and had a couple stores. And, they were just doing really well cash flow wise, and they'd figured out maybe a niche in their particular town or market that I could buy maybe 1 or 2 locations they have, existing, and then we might give them another one but, those are really focusing more on, the real estate is important on those transactions. Usually if they're local people like that and they've been in the market forever, they're pretty good about finding kind of value add or high quality locations that we would have an interest in.
You mentioned multiple sites, and you mentioned attractive buildings. What other factors influence the value of real estate or the interest in real estate?
Well, we look heavily at not only at the real estate. We're a REIT, that's important to us, but just the cash flow of the operator and the company and how profitable they are in their existing business. So,
right.
Yeah.
And for you, that's what I mentioned earlier, that you want to consider the risk associated with the person that's operating the real estate you're about to buy, just like they would if they were making that decision. So that makes sense. And in today's booming market with unemployment at the lowest it's been since 1969, so 50 years, we're counseling our clients right now that occupancy should be high and cash flow should be strong. So if that's not the case, we want to hear from you, because we certainly want to be a resource. If you're having trouble with financial strength in this market, we want to help you guys find out why. So Thrive, look at our Thrive workshop. Let's talk a little bit, Gregg, about the process itself. So, excuse me, let's say that a person is considering, well, let's just take the real estate independently, because we talked last time about the business process. But let's say that a person is considering selling their real estate as a growth asset and or along with their business. Talk a little bit about how the process works, what they should expect to be able to produce, what factors go along with that, and how long it takes. Let's talk about some of that.
Sure. I mean, we try to streamline it. We do a lot of deals, so we, every week we're closing a couple transactions around here. So we feel like it's fairly streamlined in a simple process. The important thing is usually a lot of our business, obviously, is people come to us and say, I have these 3 locations or 1 location or 30 locations I would consider selling. And here's how much money I want, and here's the unit level performance of those locations. And with that information, I can kind of give them a high level on, that portfolio, where I see the value and what a transaction might look like. If we get further into it, then obviously, I need more on the corporate finance, corporate analysis of the company, and the ownership and the management, and we delve into the real estate more. But I mean, on the front end, we kind of start with, what do you want, or what are you asking us to consider? And then what does those particular units look like? That's a bulk of our business. We do some construction, which obviously on a construction location, I know some of your clients, we're funding their construction. Generally, how those work, the tenant or the operator would identify a site and kind of give us a budget of the location, give us where the location is, how much it's going to cost to build, and on those particular transactions, we look to their existing corporate financials and their units to see if they, based on how they're doing now on their existing company, would that support the kind of rent that would be proposed on a to-be-built new location. So, the process if you send in here's my units I want, here's how much money, we can evaluate that pretty quickly. And then if you want to go to kind of round 2, it's something we both want to pursue. Then we get into more of the full financials, and look, we can underwrite things, and we can get you an LOI quickly. Underwriting's fairly, we have a couple calls, we may have to come out and meet you, but we see all the properties we buy technically, so we would have to go look at the real estate. But if you come in probably a 3 to 4 week process to get it fully underwritten, and then the close is probably another 30 days, depending on the timing of the third party reports, like the survey phase 1 property condition reports, which you may or may not be familiar with, but basically just a survey on the property, an environmental assessment, and a building assessment. So yeah, I mean, from start to finish, it could be a 60-day process.
Sounds reasonable, though. And we've got some fabulous questions. So I want to jump right into questions. We have about 10 minutes left, and that was great information. One was, and maybe you can expand a little bit more on this, in the process, what inspections take place? So you mentioned the third-party inspections, the survey, the environmental, and a general facility inspection. And am I hitting all of them there?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we do have to pull a title report, but that's a fairly painless item, right? So we just call the title company and ask for the current status. So yeah, that's it.
So actually,
from a third party standpoint, right?
Right. And it sounds pretty similar to any real estate transaction. There's really nothing unique that's left off or added in for you guys than any other real estate
transaction. We really don't do appraisals. We're not a bank.
Right.
We do our own kind of internal valuations, or rely on a third party firm kind of behind the scenes a little bit, but that's seamless to the client.
Okay. And this goes back to what I said earlier, I think, and maybe you can agree or disagree, that in the world of assessing the risk associated with the rent stream, the appraisal or what it's worth in the market as an alternative use is less important than the strength of the tenant and your feeling that they can continue to make that rent payment.
That's fair.
Okay.
Sure.
Less important, not completely unimportant, but the strength of the tenant generally outweighs what it would be a traditional appraisal.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, it just varies. It's a pretty wide range on early education. On, I saw your slide that said $15 a foot. That's probably about, that's a fair middle of the range. Some are much lower, and some kind of the new product out there, higher end and much higher income areas is more than that. So I guess on that front, we kind of rely on, we have a large portfolio, we have a large database, and we kind of have a pretty good handle internally on what things are worth from a, per square foot in real estate perspective.
Right. When we do financial benchmarking and counsel our clients, we agree that $15 a foot is sort of an average, middle of the road. We do have clients in older buildings who it might be $8 a foot, and we have clients in high commission rate areas in brand new buildings that might be $20 a foot. But 15 seems to be an average. Coincidentally, maybe, we also counsel that when a school is 70 to 80% full, they should be paying about 15% of that revenue in rent. Do you have a benchmark on that, or do you agree with that?
I do. There's always, that's probably about right. I mean, that's kind of the industry standard, right? I mean, it does matter. I know some people franchise, some don't. Franchisees obviously maybe they have to pay royalties and into advertising funds. So maybe that's sometimes ratios like that are a little high for them. But if it's company operated and there's nobody else taking royalties or anything, then definitely that's a good number. And so again, some of the higher income where they're just charging a lot more per student and the real estate's more expensive. Sometimes, it may go a little higher than that, but again, like the 15 a foot, that's a fair starting point.
Okay, good. Thanks. The 15-15 rule. I like it.
Yeah.
Someone else is asking if they are selling their real estate, do they need their own attorney? Would you recommend that a person have their own attorney review documents and advise them in a process, or is it pretty straightforward?
Yeah, I mean, it's straightforward, but we would counsel everyone. I think you need an attorney because, look, the main documents for us on those transactions are a lease and a purchase and sale agreement, right? And we produce those, but you should have an attorney look them over.
We agree with that. We have clients at times choose not to do it, and it's just our advice. But especially at the end of a real estate closing, there are a good many documents that need to be produced, and we feel like that our attorney partners are very valuable in that process. Someone else is asking about what closing costs could be expected on a sale of their real estate.
Well, first, I guess from our standpoint, we don't really charge a fee or anything. So it's really just a negotiation, I would say, for who pays for the phase one, the survey and the title, right? I mean, and you have to pay your own lawyer. We pay for our attorney to draw up the lease and the purchase and sale agreement. Look, phase ones, the environmental aren't, and sometimes they're a lot less and a lot more, but I think they're generally run about, $1,500 to $2,000. A survey of the property is kind of more in the $2,500 to $3,500 range of property. And then, title is just all over the place, depending on what state you're in and what county you're in, and whether you have any transfer tax, which is also, just varies by your jurisdiction.
Right. We get asked this question a lot as well. And in general, there's a customary practice in most every state of who pays what. But of course, you mentioned it's negotiable, and that's true. Everything in a transaction is negotiable. We just recommend that real estate sellers understand what those are, and that they know ahead what their potential expenses will be in the process, and they don't get surprised by that at the end. But good.
Right. Before they would, everyone, yeah, you're right. Everyone would have by the time they sign a contract, a purchase and sale agreement, I think they'll know very close to what cost everyone's committed to paying.
Right. Okay. And then someone is asking us, if a 1031 exchange could be used to purchase a vacation home. I'll take a stab at this, and then maybe you are more current than I am, Greg, because I don't want to pretend to know tax as well as I used to when I was a tax preparer. Investment property to investment property is the rule on 1031 exchanges. A vacation home can be a investment property, but you actually have to rent it a certain number of weeks a year. And I think that is, you can only use it personally 2 weeks a year. Can you piggyback on that at all, Greg?
Yeah, look, and it's can't give any tax advice or anything, but
right.
I would agree with you. I think that as long as you stay, it may be doable if you structure it correctly and follow the right rules.
Right.
It should be. So.
Right. And I love that question. That means we have people out there thinking about their next best life. And I'm right there with you. So thank you for that question. We have a couple more questions, but I am going to summarize those in a blast out to you guys. We have hit the end of our hour here, and I want to get over to a couple of things before we end. We have our next master class on Thursday, May 16th. We want to talk to you at that point about very concrete, stable ways to make your business more valuable. We like to work with people years before they consider an event with their business, and I think you're always preparing for the future. And also, I have to throw this in, but people, I get accused a lot of talking business and financial. Well, that's what I do, first of all. But also, I don't think that's contrary with the mission that you started to provide quality education. I think it's necessary. We call it no money, no mission. And if you don't have the resources you need, you are not going to be effective in the mission that you set out to provide. You're going to sacrifice yourself, your teachers, and your family. So we just believe that those have to go together. So join us on May 16th. That should be interesting. Gregg, thank you so much for joining us today. That was great information. Did I leave out any question that you think would be great for us to hear about, or any information that you could share?
No, I mean, I think we covered the highlights. You know, if anyone's interested, I'm sure reaching out to Kathy, she can connect us or give you more color on anything we didn't answer. But I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time. That was great. We certainly, as an industry, appreciate the interest from the real estate community into what we're doing, and appreciate the recognition that this is a valuable industry, and appreciate the work that you're doing. So thank you, and thanks to our guests. We will talk with you guys soon. I hope that your week ends very well. Take care.